Once upon a time, there's a boxer named Rocky Balboa. He fights out of the mean streets of 1970 Philadelphia, and while he might be dirt poor, he has a heart of gold. He pours his blood, sweat, and tears into his sport every day, and before you know it, one training montage later, he's fighting for the heavyweight world championship. This is how the film Rocky sets up the ultimate underdog sports movie. Unfortunately, Rocky loses the championship. At the end of the fight, there's a mixture of blood and sweat dripping down his face. But you know what else is on his face? A smile. Why? Because even though he lost the championship, Rocky goes the distance. A boxing term meaning to endure every round without quitting. He's proud of himself for the character it took to quite literally never throw in the towel. Not just during the fights, but in the build-up as well. Because Rocky understood one simple truth. One that I want to share with you today. That the journey is more important than the destination because of how it shapes our character. So today, let's step into the ring and examine why Rocky was so obsessed with going the distance. First, we'll take a jab at how our culture overemphasizes the destinations in life. Next, we'll bob and weave through the harms of this mentality before finally countering with some solutions. Unfortunately, unfortunately, in our modern day and age, despite how beloved the Rocky movies are, it seems that nobody really takes this message to heart. From students cheating on a test, to athletes abusing steroids, to politicians lying to win elections. We value external achievement more than internal growth. And our day-to-day conversations reflect this. Currently, we only compliment somebody's character when there's nothing else to compliment. Like when a sports team is getting demolished and the commentary has to remain unbiased, so they praise how much effort and determination the losing team has instead of their skills. Or like when you give your speech to your coach for the first time, and the only positive thing she can say is, Michael, I can really tell how much effort you put into this. But seriously, when we overemphasize the importance of external achievements, we forget about the character of our actions that success is truly defined by. For example, a study published by Economic Inquiry found that couples who spent more money on their weddings were also more likely to get divorced because they prioritized surface level success over the underlying character traits that lead to a lasting marriage. Now, we often don't mean to think this way, but it's so hard not to. Because whether it's social media apps, dating apps, or even college apps, in the court of our culture's conscience, the destinations in life are the only thing that matters. While these institutions rely on external metrics in order to turn a profit, psychologist Kim Passer finds that when individuals prioritize extrinsic goals, it correlates to higher levels of anxiety and depression. And that is the harm that I fear most. But this mindset is not only institutionalized, but also internalized by individuals as means for determining their self-worth. See, most of us want to be loved for who we are and not just what we achieve. I mean, if you had a friend who only made you feel valued when you achieved something, you'd be like, dude, that's a terrible friend, right? Yet, so many of us treat ourselves this way, myself included. Which is why this topic is so important to me. Because growing up in Silicon Valley, one of the most competitive regions in the world, I internalized this message that I'm defined by my achievements. So earlier this school year, when I took the SAT, I didn't just see it as another test. I saw it as a reflection of who I was. As a result, I studied relentlessly. I brought work with me on vacations. I woke up early and stayed up late doing hundreds of practice problems. But on the day of the test, I fell short. And in that moment, I not only felt like all my hard work was for nothing, but that I was nothing. And I told myself that that's how I deserved to feel for failing. And that once I finally do achieve enough, then I'll finally start to feel like I'm enough. That's when I heard the story of Madison Hall. She had a great GPA. She was a D1 athlete, and admitted into an Ivy League university. She was everything that I aspired to be. As author Kate Fagan insightfully noted in her biography of Madison's life, even though she achieved a lot, Madison still tied her identity into her achievements. So much so that one day, when she went through a particular point of academic and athletic struggle, it translated into an identity struggle. She left a note in her dorm room reading, "I don't know who I am anymore." And later that day, she made the decision to take her own life. Madison's story demonstrates that no amount of external success will ever fully be able to remedy our internal struggles. As Alex Hormozy once put it, you've already achieved things that you said would have made you happy. So if nothing in this world is ever enough to satisfy us, then how do we solve this? Well, traditional wisdom tells us to just enjoy the journey, but life isn't all sunshine and rainbows, so that's more of a fortune cookie and less of a solution. Real solutions come from Scripture. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 21 says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And those treasures in heaven are what God values, our inner growth. So the solution is to focus on the character that we develop along the way, because what we value will shape how we act. A study by Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck found that children who are praised for their effort rather than their results developed a stronger work ethic and a greater willingness to take on challenges. Because when character is valued over external achievement, people have a reason to keep giving their best regardless of the results, since they aren't discouraged when losing and not complacent when winning. Additionally, Andrew Huberman, professor of neurobiology at Stanford University, found that the more we practice a character trait, such as discipline, the stronger the stronger the neural pathways in our brain for that character become, the more likely we are to repeat it in the future in any area of life. So, going back to my example, as it turns out, my journey with the SAT wasn't such a waste after all. Because every time I pushed myself to study, especially when it was the last thing I felt like doing, every time I failed a practice test yet chose to keep going, I scientifically became a more resilient and disciplined person. Not just for the SAT, but in any future area of life. As Steve Maraboli once put it, sometimes the greatest thing to come out of all your hard work isn't what you get for it, but who you become for it. So I like to think of this as me becoming the Rocky Balboa of the SAT. Ironically, Rocky is also how you could describe my current academic situation. But seriously, God puts each of us on our journeys in order to shape us into who He destined us to be. Because as the philosopher Seneca once articulated, character is not made in a crisis, it is only exhibited. In the Bible, David had the character and skills to defend God's people from Goliath because he developed it through years of defending livestock in the field. Moses had to tend to sheep for 40 years in the wilderness before God finally called him to shepherd Israel. For us, it could look like a variety of things. Being patient with an annoying coworker could be God's way of preparing you to be patient with an annoying child He plans to bless you with someday. Keeping a good attitude when you lose a sports game helps you to keep a godly attitude when you lose something more important in life. And of course, preparing your speeches helps prepare you to speak boldly for Christ when you go out into the world. And yet, it might seem a little tedious or mundane at times to build our character in these smaller actions day to day. But as Rocky himself once said, that's how winning is done. And the more we think like Rocky and realize that the journey is more important than the destination because of how it shapes our character, the sooner we'll be able to create a culture that's less focused on the destinations and more focused on going the distance. Thank you so much.